Did.
I like it. I think it's very nice. I've never figured out how to do that. At some point, I'll have to figure it out, but
The virtual background is easier than the replacement photo.
I can't figure out how to do the photo on the other thing when you go to not having anything either. So both of those are hard for me.
All right, Madam Chair, we are live.
All right, this is the public hearing for General Government A and General Government B. We have 23 speakers tonight. You will be able to ask questions, but please try to keep your questions succinct and not repetitive, and no more than 2 questions per person for the speakers. Thank you very much, everybody, for coming in tonight. So we have up first, we have Dr. Edwards. Dr. Edwards, nice seeing you, ma'am. Please go ahead and give your testimony.
Senator Austin, Representative Walker, ranking members Minor and France, and distinguished members of the Appropriations Committee. My name is Karen Edwards. I live in Stamford. I'm a retired physician and public health professional, and I'm a member of Connecticut Against Gun Violence. I'm testifying in support of fully funding Project Longevity Program as it's included in the Office of Policy and Management budget. Gun violence is a leading cause of preventable death and injury among children, teens, and adults. And gun violence disproportionately affects people from minority racial and ethnic backgrounds. The best strategies to decrease gun violence are based on high-quality research evidence. As a physician and public health professional, I support the model used by Project Longevity because it's based on good research evidence, such as that presented in the 2015 working paper from Yale's Institute for Policy and Social Studies. The project uses messaging from a consortium of law enforcement, social workers, and community members targeted to violent street groups. And the messages communicate that future violence will not be tolerated, but it also offers tangible help to those who want it. To be successful, Project Longevity needs funding to pay for the social services that help high-risk individuals escape from cycles of violence. According to the Giffords Law Center, gun violence is estimated to directly cost Connecticut taxpayers at least $90 million annually. Investing more in community-based violence prevention programs could not only save lives and reduce trauma inflicted on Connecticut communities, it could also save money for taxpayers. While fully funding Project Longevity is really important, I believe the state also needs to invest more in preventing community gun violence that disproportionately impacts Black and Brown communities in Connecticut. That's why I'm also asking you to support a state-level grant-making authority with dedicated funding along the lines proposed by Connecticut Action Against Gun Violence. It would deliver reliable funding to other types of community-based gun violence prevention programs like those operated by the Compass Youth Collaborative and Hartford Communities That Care in Hartford, the CT Violence Intervention Program in New Haven, and Street Safe in Bridgeport, just to name a few. I support more funding for gun violence prevention programs and urge you to fully fund the Office of Policy and Management budget for Project Longevity. Thank you for your consideration of this very important issue.
Thank you, Dr. Edwards. Are there any questions for Dr. Edwards? Seeing none. Thank you very much for coming. Appreciate it. Next up is Kristen Song. Kristen?
Hi, good evening, Senator Austin, Representative Walker, ranking members Minor and France, and distinguished members of the Appropriation Committee. I am testifying against cuts to Project Longevity in House Bill 6439. My name is Kristen Song, and I am from Guilford. I am the co-president of the Ethan Miller Song Foundation, as well as a board member of the Connecticut Violence Intervention Program in New Haven. After Ethan was killed, I made a commitment to fight for every child who has been impacted by gun violence. I joined the board months after Ethan died. I had no idea the war zone the children of New Haven live in every day. I wanted to share with you some of my observations of my mentee from New Haven. I see a teenager. Her eyes are dull, her posture slumped, her movements as if by rote. She walks in a stupor, getting through the days, but numb of heart, mind, and body. Her smile has been replaced by tears. Her energy is gone. She wonders how she will get through the next half hour, much less the remainder of the day. The physical pain is so intense she can barely breathe. Life is a roller coaster of emotions, from panic attacks, anxiety over her future, to disbelief that her life has been shattered into a million pieces. She doesn't sleep, and when she does, they call to her. She tries to reach them, but they slip through her fingers and slowly fade away. A noise awakens her as she realizes she is sobbing. I see a teenager at the tender age of 18. She has buried her mother, her brother, who was murdered over a pair of sneakers by a 14-year-old with a gun, and her boyfriend, who was shot in the head while walking home from school. She is alone. Her immediate family is gone. She lives in a war zone while the suburbs continue to live in peace. She can't even sit on her front stoop for fear she will be shot. She watches from her window as a man stumbles onto her front lawn and dies. He was shot 3 times. Society has told her to pick herself up by her bootstraps, but you see, society has abandoned her and those like her. They are the forgotten children, cast adrift in a world of violence, and they're terrified. Do you hear her cries? I support funding for Project Longevity, but we need to do more. Other organizations like CTVIP, they're on the front lines. They're trying to meet the children's basic needs: food, bedding, clothes, sports uniforms, school supplies. They make it their job to know all of the children, but especially the most at risk. They respond to every shooting in New Haven to ensure that there's no retaliation or fighting. They are the mediators of the city. Their job is very dangerous, but they are respected by the youth. They work tirelessly in the New Haven school system in an effort to steer children down the right path. They're on call 24/7. They are Connecticut's unsung heroes. Their ask is simple. Please help them save their precious children. My ask: come visit, come meet with them, come spend some time with the children. Let them know that they matter, that Connecticut has not given up on them. I understand the pressure this committee is under. There is only a finite amount of money. But the truth is, we can't do it alone, and we need your help. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Kristen. I see that Representative Belinsky has a question or comment.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Mrs. Song, I just wanted to again express my sympathies. And you, I believe, are one of the unsung heroes. I appreciate your advocacy.
Thank you.
All I have, Madam Chair.
Thank you.
So carry on.
Thank you very much, Representative. Are there any other comments or questions? Seeing none, thank you very much. We appreciate it. Up next is Mayor Pisarro from New London.
Good evening, Senator Austin, Representative Walker, ranking members France and Craig, and members of the committee. First of all, thank you very much for your service. It is greatly appreciated, and I thank you for this opportunity to talk to you tonight. I want to speak in favor of what this committee can do to help support Senate Bill 873, which is the 3-tiered pilot. As you know, the governor's budget flat funded the various line items for municipal aid. And what this means for us as we put together our budget is absent some other increase in revenue sources, a city like mine will have to cut its budget just to cover the built-in fixed cost increases year over year. Believe me, I'm not ungrateful that we're at least, there's no damage being done. We're not being cut with our municipal aid. So I appreciate that effort on the part of the governor, but that really actually means that we have to cut services to do that. And since our revenue is principally supported by property taxes, a regressive property tax system, a city like New London, if we don't see some other revenue increase, we'll have to increase our taxes. So it's even worse that the pilot funding is once again flat funded for a city like New London, where 40% of our property, our only revenue source, has been exempted from paying property taxes. So this is the vicious cycle that we're stuck in, and this is why we're killing our cities in this state, especially our urban centers. New London serves as the urban center for southeastern Connecticut. I strongly support Senate Bill 873 in this Senator Looney's three-tiered pilot proposal, as does the Connecticut Conference of Municipalities, of which I serve on the board. And that means that this bill has bipartisan support, but that support is conditioned on increased funding for pilot, so that we ensure that we can fund this three-tiered proposal in a way that's fair to all the municipalities in our state. So I'm here to ask you to do what the governor's budget doesn't do, and that's to increase funding for pilot. CCM currently estimates that the increase in funding would require about $130 million. I thank you for your time this evening, and I'll stand by to answer any questions.
Thank you very much, Mayor. Are there any questions for the mayor? Thank you, Mayor, for all the work you do for Southeastern Connecticut. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Senator Alston. Thank you all. Have a great evening.
You too. Up next is Marcus Wilson. Mr. Wilson, you're up.
Thank you. So Senator Alston, Representative Walker, and members of the Appropriations Committee, I want to say thank you for allowing me to speak this evening, first and foremost. My name is Marcus Wilson. I currently live in Hartford, Connecticut, and I am a supporter of Connecticut Against Gun Violence. I was on probation myself in 2018. I initially became a participant of Project Longevity. Project Longevity has opened my eyes personally to the power of education, why education is important, as well as what it can do for me. And without the help of Project Longevity, I won't be on the trajectory I am currently. As of January of next year, I will be graduating from college with my associate's degree in criminology. And my goal with my education is to support, educate, and help those who come from the same communities, circumstances, and obstacles that I had growing up. I fully support funding Project Longevity because if there is another Marcus out there, they can help him too. In addition to Project Longevity, there are several other organizations that are doing gun violence prevention and interruption work. And while Project Longevity worked for me, however, I understand this is not the case for everyone. This is why there are different programs and modules that are also in place to help those who have different needs and circumstances throughout the entire state. This is why it's important to fund these programs as well. According to information provided by the Connecticut Legislator's Office of Legislative Research, the California Violence Intervention and Prevention Grant Program was funded at $30 million in fiscal 2020. And although California's population is much larger than ours, that is still about 3 times higher per capita than what the state of Connecticut spends on community gun violence prevention programs. Now, the state often talks about how much they want to end gun violence, yet it is not fully reflected in that budget. And if we regard the budget as a moral document, then the budget needs to prioritize funding for this issue. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Wilson. I appreciate you coming. Congratulations on your college education. I look forward to seeing you one day serving in the legislature. Are there any questions for Mr. Wilson? Seeing none, Thank you very much for coming. We appreciate your testimony.
Thank
Next up is Sandra Roberts.
Not present, Madam Chair.
Next up after that is Shannon Weigel.
Not present either.
Next up is Richard Famlighetti.
Not present either.
Next up is Mark Anthony.
Also not present.
Next up is Ari Rosenberg. Sir, you have your 3 minutes. Please go ahead.
Thank you. Senator Austin, Representative Walker, ranking members Minor and France, and distinguished members of the Appropriations Committee. I am Rabbi Ari Rosenberg. I grew up in Waterford, Connecticut. I live in New Milford, Connecticut, and I am proud to serve as the Executive Director of the Association of Religious Communities, Danbury's only purposefully interfaith nonprofit organization on the front lines preventing poverty, homelessness, and domestic violence. Our mission is to alleviate the causes of violence, suffering, and hate while establishing peace, justice, and human dignity. I am testifying in opposition to the $50,000 cut to Project Longevity as included in the governor's proposed budget. I ask you to fully fund the program as it was passed in the fiscal year 2020-2021 biennium budget. The recent dramatic rise in white supremacist, anti-Semitic, anti-Muslim, anti-Asian, anti-gay, and other bigoted points of view are threatening the heart and soul of America. The violent attacks upon the Tree of Life Synagogue and Poway Chabad hit no closer to home for me than the attacks upon Mother Emanuel African Methodist Episcopal Church of Charleston, South Carolina, the Sikh Temple at Oak Creek, Wisconsin, not to mention the United States Capitol. In the years since President Kennedy was assassinated, more Americans have been killed by Americans with guns right here on the home front than in all the wars the United States ever fought combined. With 5% of the world's population, the United States is responsible for over 30% of the world's mass shootings of innocent civilians. We can't save everyone, but the Talmud teaches that he who saves one life, it is as though he has saved the entire world. Leviticus 19:16 teaches in Hebrew, Lo ta'amod al dam re'acha. In English, you shall not stand idly by the blood of your neighbor. There's nothing more important in the United States than the right to life for one and for all. If you love life and you love children, then we cannot stand idly by while gun violence takes the lives of 30 Americans every single day. If we want to achieve racial justice, we must make people safe in the communities where they reside. To do so requires funding programs like Project Longevity that have proven track records of reducing gun violence. The group violence intervention strategy on which Project Longevity is modeled has been studied for years and has been proven effective based on more than 60 peer-reviewed studies. A 2015 study conducted by Yale concluded that in New Haven, Project Longevity was associated with a reduction of 5 group member-involved shootings and homicides each month. In 2020, gun homicides increased 50% in Connecticut compared with 2019. Project Longevity brings together law enforcement, community members, and social service providers to directly engage with violent street groups to communicate that future violence will not be tolerated, while also offering tangible help to those who want it. For Connecticut to have a meaningful impact in reducing gun violence, Project Longevity needs funding to pay for the social services that help high-risk individuals escape from cycles of violence. While fully funding Project Longevity is important, I believe the state also needs to invest more in preventing community gun violence that disproportionately impacts Black and Brown communities in Connecticut. That is why I'm also asking...
Mr. Rosenberg, are you almost done?
I'm almost done.
Okay, thank you.
That is why I'm also asking you to support a state-level grant-making authority with dedicated funding along the lines proposed by Connecticut Against Gun Violence. I support more funding for gun violence prevention programs and urge you to fully fund the Office of Policy and Management budget for Project Longevity. Thank you for your consideration. Sincerely, Rabbi Ari Rosenberg, New Milford, Connecticut.
Thank you, Rabbi. Senator Kushner.
want to thank you, Rabbi Rosenberg, for not just your testimony tonight, but for the advocacy work you're doing on behalf of our community and for the work of the organization ARC, which is highly regarded in Danbury. And so thank you very much for being here to testify tonight.
Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other questions or comments? Seeing none, Rabbi, thank you very much for coming today. Really appreciate it. Next up is Carrie Kokoro, and I might be saying your name wrong, but I apologize. Carrie, you're up.
Oh,
You have your
you
3 minutes.
said it perfectly. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay. Senator Austin, Representative Walker, ranking members of Minor and France, and distinguished members of the Appropriations Committee. My name is Carrie Kokoro. I'm a registered nurse in the emergency room, and I work in the community of New London. I'm newly involved in Connecticut Against Gun Violence, and I learned of this very important appropriations meeting yesterday, so I'm very happy to be here today. First, I'm testifying in opposition to the $50,000 cut to Project Longevity, as included in the governor's proposed budget. I ask that you fully fund the program as it was passed in the fiscal year. Gun violence prevention is very important to me because it's a topic that I unfortunately have experience in, and it's very close to my heart. With my very limited time here today, I would like to give my perspective in hopes that we can do some more. Working in the ER, I see the end result of a shooting, and I am then witness to the perpetuation of more gun violence that follows. The tragedy starts in the ER with a warning in real time. The circumstances are jarring and very sudden. A victim of a shooting is on the way and we mobilize. The ER and hospital goes into lockdown. A metal detector is erected. Security and police presence are increased inside and outside. The patient arrives and life-saving measures are transferred to us. When it's over, the tragedy deepens and you're looking at this young body that you could not save. As it gets quieter in the room, it gets louder down the hall, where parents, family, and friends are crying and praying. And now you're on your way down the hall to accompany the doctor, and he tells the parents that their child or young adult has died. The fallout of emotion at this time is unparalleled to anything you could imagine. Screaming and praying, passing out, vomiting, unintelligible words, inconsolable loved ones. This is a heartbreaking thing to witness. And now you tell them they can't see, hold, or pray, or be with the one they love. They're told that their child is now a crime scene and they are not allowed to go near the body. The evidence needs to be collected. The despair is horrifying. And if you haven't heard it yet, that's when you start to hear the promises. The promises of, I'm going to get him. I'm going to find him. I promise to kill him myself. This crushing pain is quickly transferred to rage and revenge. There isn't anyone to catch this family, no direction to go, no closure, no community outreach. We stand there and we watch all that anger and rage and revenge leave the hospital, and you know more gun violence will follow. More heartache and agony for families in the community. I'm an ER nurse, but what further makes my perspective unique is that my husband is a homicide detective in the same town. We say collectively, when there is no support system in place, no team to mobilize, no prevention program to contact, and now, quite recently, no youth officers in the schools. Who has a pulse on what's happening? How is it possible to stop such a heinous thing such as gun violence? When gun violence rips through the community, we both will tell you, we are the last line, we are the end result. It's too late when he's called in or I'm called in. Another young person is gone and the loss it brings keep you frozen in time. It doesn't go away, it's transferred in a deadly way. It circulates, it perpetuates. It's a pain that passes on to the next generation, and it breaks families and it will break communities if it's not addressed and supported. I'm here to try to stop that, and I'm here today for all about the prevention. In addition to fully funding Project Longevity, I support more funding for gun violence prevention programs in all impacted cities. Specifically, I am asking you to support a state-level grant-making authority with dedicated funding proposed by Connecticut Against Gun Violence. Thank you for your consideration and your time.
Kathy, you're muted.
Thanks. I try to mute so that I'm not talking, they don't hear all the dog noises. Carrie, thank you. You did a nice job. Thank you very much. Are there any comments or questions for Carrie? Seeing none, thank you so much for coming tonight. We really appreciate your testimony. Next up is Mayor Elicker. Mayor, thank you very much for coming tonight.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for the work you're doing. You must be exhausted. I keep hearing about very, very long hearings. And just wanted to thank Mr. and Ms. Kokoro for one of the, I think, most poignant descriptions of what many communities around the state are dealing with. We've lost 7 people already this year to homicides. Representative Walker, Senator Austin, ranking members Minor and France, and members of the committee. While the governor's proposed budget doesn't include this proposal, I am here to urge you to provide the necessary funding in the state to create 3 need-based tiers within the pilot program, as laid out in Senate Bill 873. This legislation, as you know, was heard before the Finance Committee, in which dozens of residents, employees, elected leaders spoke in favor of the proposal. In addition, a bipartisan group of municipal leaders from across our state spoke. And I joined 27 of my counterparts in towns and cities of all sizes, and first select persons and mayors from all corners of the state, some of whom would not even receive funding under this program, in a letter to stress the importance of the proposal to get desperately needed funds to communities that need them the most in our state. In New Haven, nearly 60% of our property is non-taxable. And when you think about that, 40% of the city is paying 100% of the real estate taxes. And over the years, our share of payment in lieu of taxes funding has gone down consistently and has contributed to an increasingly dire financial situation in our city, putting a lot of pressure on our ability to provide even the most basic services to our residents, and of course, pressure on our taxpayers. And just to give you a sense, in the last year's budget, I eliminated over 100 positions in our budget, still had to raise taxes. And this year we're facing a $66 million deficit. The $66 million deficit when our entire library budget is $4 million, our entire youth budget is $4 million, our entire policing budget is $43 million. I think there's 2 things that are important to highlight about this. First is it's a moral question. We're talking a lot about systemic racism in our state and systemic inequality. And if we truly believe underserved communities, and particularly Black and Brown communities, ought to have the same access to services as white residents, then we shouldn't make it near impossible for struggling communities to survive. In New Haven, we can't even fund basic services, not because we're incompetent or wasteful, but because we don't have enough revenue and aren't able to collect it because of these limitations. If our state wants safe streets and well-funded schools and a robust economy to start businesses and get good paying jobs, we've got to help support those municipalities that are struggling in this way. And the second is a practical question. You know, what do we think is going to happen if cities like New Haven cease to be the economic engines in our state? We've had increased gun violence. We're not able to fund even a librarian or guidance counselor in every one of our schools. And our taxes are already quite high. If we can't help support our municipalities, cities like New Haven will continue to struggle even more. And that is not good for obviously New Haven, but our state. This bill will be transformative, and it's a real opportunity for us to make meaningful change in the way that we invest in many municipalities around the state. So I urge your support.
Thank you very much, Mayor. Are there any comments or questions for the mayor? Thank you very much, Mayor, for coming tonight. We really appreciate it. And we appreciate all you're doing for New Haven.
Good to see you all.
Next up is Michael Ains. Mr. Ains, you're up.
Thank you. My name is Michael Ains. I live in Litchfield. Senator Austin, Representative Walker, and the ranking members, Minor and France, and the members of the committee, I'm happy to have a moment with you this evening to testify in support of Project Longevity and all that is included in that bill to help the youth. I am a retired headmaster from an independent school in Connecticut, and following that, I spent 10 years working in the Early Childhood Association in New York City, and then continued working in education for another 10 years all over the country in a consulting and interim basis. So I've worked with children my entire career. Furthermore, on the day of Sandy Hook, I was addressing a middle school group of students, about 300 students, in a chapel service where I had to speak to them about what had happened there. And that was clearly a transforming experience for me and for the children in the room. And it's what's launched me on my retirement to volunteer for Connecticut Against Gun Violence and do what I can to help with the understanding of what education can do for young children and youth in particular. Education works in all its forms as a preventative measure to, in our case, to gun violence and so forth. And so the more we can do to educate and work with children in the inner cities and communities of our state on the front end of things, the more success we will have in reducing gun violence, and the statistics and the programs demonstrate that. And we all know as administrators in our various jobs and lives that if you work on it on the front end, you don't have to fix it on the back end. And we learn that lesson daily, I think, in what we do. Certainly as school administrators, we want to do it right the first time. So clearly doing it right is in support of Connecticut, of the longevity program, as well as the Campus Youth Collaborative in Hartford, and other programs such as Street Safe and Bridgeport and so forth. So as a citizen, as a retired educator, and as one who's worked with youth my entire career, I really urge you to do everything you can to get the funding for the longevity bill up to speed. It means a lot and makes a difference. And thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Ains. Are there any comments or questions for Mr. Ains? Seeing none, thank you very much, Mr. Ains. Appreciate you coming tonight. Next up is Kevnisha Boyd. You got your 3 minutes, young lady.
Thank you. Good evening, Senator Austin, Representative Walker, Senator Minor, Representative France, and members of the Appropriations Committee. Thank you for the opportunity to speak with you tonight. My name is Kevnisha Boyd. I live in Hamden, and I'm a board member of Stop South Terry, Connecticut. As a former mental health counselor for the Department of Corrections, I understand the importance of external oversight and believe that the legislature should appropriate funds to establish an independent oversight body for the Department of Corrections. Our organization is supporting the Judiciary's Committee Protect Act, which provides an effective model for correctional oversight by creating an Office of Corrections Ombuds under the Office of Government Accountability. Working for Department of Corrections was my dream job until it started to compromise my health. The poor mental health treatment, witnessing physical and verbal abuse, and deprivation of basic human rights began to traumatize me. What ultimately led to my resignation from the Department of Corrections was that in March 2019, Carl Robbie Talbot was found dead in chains in solitary confinement rather than receiving a clinical alternative. He received punitive punishment. Department of Corrections does not currently offer adequate rehabilitative services, pro-social programming, or effective oversight to address the true needs of incarcerated people. Moreover, with no external oversight, I witnessed firsthand reports of staff misconduct and grievances from incarcerated people be ignored on several occasions. Currently, there is no safe and private procedure to report misconduct and or grievances from incarcerated people. The Department of Corrections culture ensues moral superiority over incarcerated people, lending acceptance and conformity to abuse authority and power. In an environment that is responsible for the health and well-being of thousands of people, it's imperative that there is external accountability. Connecticut is one of 13 states with no form of meaningful oversight in the country, leaving us far behind. The PROTECT Act provides legislative means to implement the real change for correctional staff and incarcerated people. The PROTECT Act will save Connecticut money and create a more rehabilitative institution and safer communities for us all. I urge you to appropriate funds to support Department of Corrections oversight by funding an independent Office of Corrections ombuds, and in doing so, protect the lives of incarcerated people as well as Department of Corrections staff, such as myself and their families across the state. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much, Kavnisha. It's a pleasure seeing you again.
You as well, Senator Austin.
Representative Felipe.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Kavnisha, for your testimony. I just wanted to ask you, based on your knowledge of the subject, what do you think what do you know that other states are doing in terms of abolishing solitary confinement?
Yes, thank you, Representative Felipe, for asking that question. Yes, so my knowledge includes that Connecticut is quite behind. And so I'm going to highlight one state, which is Colorado. So the reason I'm highlighting Colorado is because they have a very progressive and dual procedure in terms of addressing the needs of incarcerated people and the needs of correctional staff. So three aspects that Colorado has done really good at is less isolated units, policy measures, and they utilize less isolated units. So some examples is that Colorado has established de-escalation cells. So the Stop Solitary Confinement Committee has met with the former commissioner of the Colorado Department of Corrections, and he gave us some extensive information. And so the de-escalation cells includes pastel colored walls, chalkboards, whiteboards, sound machines. Sometimes they utilize therapy dogs. The Colorado Department of Corrections also has less restrictive rehabilitative units for people that have mental health issues. And some less restrictive policies that go on within these units are offender accountability, peer supervision, pro-social programming, how to resolve.
Keep going.
How to resolve conflict, anger management, again, therapy dogs, therapeutic skills. They are out of the cell for at least 15 hours a day. And those 15 hours include group therapy, individual therapy. Also, the Colorado system has implemented specific restrictions on preventing people with mental health conditions from being allowed to be placed in solitary confinement, in addition to juveniles and pregnant women. Stop Solitary is looking to prevent all people from being housed in solitary confinement. And some of the results that Colorado has seen is less assaults on staff from incarcerated people, reduced pair-on-pair assaults from incarcerated people. Staff are happier and healthier. The environment is a lot safer. There's less need for solitary confinement. And again, I'm just highlighting Colorado just to bring it back. Connecticut is one of 13 states with no external accountability. A lot of other states have very specific policy measures and very specific diversionary and rehabilitative units within their prison system that Connecticut doesn't have. We're missing a lot of pieces in terms of correctional and prison reform. And a lot of our practices ensue a very immoral condition. And that does not create a safe community for us. And the Colorado commissioner reported that these de-escalation cells and some of the policy changes that they made were not costly. So based on our financial review in terms of protecting lives and saving dollars, it is estimated that we will save approximately $14 million a year by eliminating isolated confinement within Connecticut prisons and jails. So that's a lot of money. And we certainly can use that money to, again, establish some of the policies such as de-escalation cells and some of the other policies that the other prisons and jails have implemented in other states.
Thank you for that. I'm getting a little tired of hearing that we're behind Colorado on a few things, but I will say that I love that your testimony had a lot of focus on mental health and treatment. We need to look into more of that in the future, and I thank you for your testimony, and thank you, Madam Chair, for letting me ask my question.
You're welcome. Are there any other comments or questions? Kevnisha, thank you very much for coming. Look forward to talking to you again.
Thank you, Senator Austin.
Up next is Mark Donald.
Good evening, Senator Austin, Representative Walker, members of the committee. Very grateful for the opportunity to speak tonight. My name is Mark Donald, and I'm the Executive Director of the Regional Youth Adult Social Action Partnership, also known as RIASAP, based in Bridgeport. And we've heard some pretty powerful testimony in support of maintaining the funding of Project Longevity at its current status. And we heard some wonderful emotional stories. We also heard the research that supports it when it's implemented faithfully. And all that is true, and then some. And the key from that, and as the chair of the Bridgeport Youth Gun Violence Task Force, we want to put the public back in public safety. And part of that is utilizing the strategies involved in Project Longevity, but it's also including the voices of the public. We have brought members of the public to give input at our tables, and they have mentioned what will work for them. And it is a community partnership along with Project Longevity. We know that gun violence impacts people on an emotional level. We know it impacts communities on a financial level. I think the last research I saw that every gunshot victim, whether it's a homicide or an injury, is the cost to the hospitalization is over $150,000. And that burden falls on us. So if we're talking about investing in our communities, I want to think about how we can do that where it's not a pay me now or pay me later situation. Furthermore, the impact of gun violence. Many years ago, the CDC recommended that exposure to gunshots be put on the adverse childhood experiences situation. So the ACEs study, as some of you may know. And if our kids are being traumatized by gunshots just by hearing them, what is the cost to our society as they come of age? And even if they're not engaging in the gun violence when they get older, what's the impact of trauma on their mental health, on their physical health, and on their emotional health? And all these things are costs that we endure. We see certainly at RIASAP on a daily basis when we're working with these young people and trying to get them out of the lifestyle. We're working with young people trying to prevent them to get into the lifestyle. And we're also working with people as they're coming out of jail and they engage in the lifestyle and they want to turn their lives around. But these beefs, as they have existed for 20 years. So employing the credible messenger piece alongside Project Longevity, alongside of members of the public and the community, is really the overall strategy that we're looking to invest in as communities. And we formed an informal partnership with our brothers and sisters in New Haven, with our brothers and sisters in Hartford, who are trying to combat the violence, and we're trying to share best practices, right? There's no ego involved as we're trying to do that. And in order to do it, we need the investment from the community, because it's certainly a public health issue just as much as some of these other issues we're dealing with. Thank you for your time, and I'm grateful for the opportunity to speak before all of you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Donald. Are there any questions or comments? Seeing none, thank you very much for coming tonight. Appreciate it.
Thanks very much. Have a good night.
You too. Next up is Ann Masaro.
Good evening. I'm Ann Masaro. I'm from the Steering Committee of Stop Solitary Connecticut, and I'd like to yield my time tonight to my co-member of the committee, of the Steering Committee, Barbara Fair. And so she's here with me and she's going to speak.
Thank you, Ann. Barbara, F-A-I-R, right?
Yes, F-A-I-R.
Thank you very much. Go ahead, Barbara.
Hi. Good evening, Madam Chair of Appropriations and other distinguished members. My name is Barbara Fair, and I'm a voter in West Haven. I'm on the Steering Committee for Stop Solitary Connecticut, an organization that seeks humane practices within Department of Corrections. I'm also a founder of My Brother's Keeper, which has the same mission. Thank you for the opportunity to come before you tonight and talk about, urge you to restore correctional oversight funding to Connecticut's budget. The decision to restore the office of ombudsman is of utmost importance to protect the lives of the most vulnerable people in our state. And I say corrections is the most vulnerable population because most other institutions within Connecticut have external oversight. And the question is, why not corrections? Manson use with houses our children is under federal investigation due to the lack of effective state oversight. According to state youth advocates in 2013, 1 in 74 youth were determined by prison staff not to need regular mental health services, although 71 had a history of struggling mental health. Connecticut is one of the 7 states with no type of correctional oversight and the only one in the Northeast which has no oversight. Connecticut is also high on the list of racial disparity among those that they caged. Connecticut's general population is 72% Caucasian, yet the incarcerated population is 72% African-American Latinx. That alone has to ask the question, what is going on in criminal justice in Connecticut and what mechanisms need to be put in place to ensure that a highly segregated state is caring for those whom they may never see or interact. One simply needs to take a look at the countless complaints from incarcerated people to officials and countless litigation against DOC to come to the conclusion that external oversight of corrections is a no-brainer. The Office of Ombudsman, which was opened in 1980 after a prison riot, was closed in 2009. It had a budget of $300,000, which had a staff who investigated complaints from incarcerated people, and they worked with DOC to resolve it. That is very much needed. It was repealed in 2009 under fiscal crisis. We need it back under a human crisis that is going on. When a woman delivers her baby in a toilet and a young boy dies within months of being incarcerated, and other mysterious deaths, including suicides, suicidal attempts, inspiring mental illness, created and exacerbated in isolation, the people need answers, and we can't get them from DLC. Untimely deaths from COVID also alone beg for the need for external oversight. 20 people died in less than a few months inside Connecticut prisons. Thousands were sickened. We can't depend on the department's public sharing for the truth. The mere fact that they didn't count 26-year-old dad, Caleb Martin, who died in the hospital in April, just 2 days after he was released from prison, and that was only court-ordered release, and he died 2 days later. And they don't even count him as one of the people who died of COVID within the facility. Connecticut is one of 4 states, according to the Pew report, that does not require a formal peer review when someone dies. That formal peer review would tell if that death was preventable. We do desperately need external oversight, and it must be. It shouldn't be a question.
Barbara, are you almost there?
Yes, yes. So I just want to, I urge you to care enough about all the citizens of Connecticut to restore funding oversight. And I thank you for your time and your undivided attention in this matter.
Thank you very much, Barbara. Are there any comments or questions? I just want to thank you for all the work you've done. Barbara, I think that you're a force to be reckoned with. Oh, Representative Walker wants to talk. Representative Walker.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I'm sorry, I was trying to fine, whatever. Hi, Barbara. How you doing? Thank you for testifying, and I agree. We have ombudsman for DCF, for nursing homes. We should have ombudsman for any facility that has somebody that's in custody for the state of Connecticut, so they have someone to talk for them. So I support what you're doing 100%. So thank you. And thank you for being so strong an advocate to protect people who don't have a voice. Thank you.
And we could just think about all the money, if you want to think about it as a fiscal issue, all the money that would be saved if we had this ombudsman would save a lot of these lawsuits that we're getting, because we're spending millions every year. We might as well spend 300,000 and have somebody in place to prevent these sicknesses and deaths.
Thank you very much, Barbara. I remember you speaking in front of Bill Dyson. So it's been a while. So thank you very much. Up next is Mayor Bronin. Mayor.
Good evening, Senator Austin, Representative Walker, members of the committee. Thanks very much for the opportunity to testify before you today. There are a number of aspects of the proposed budget that I would love to have the chance to talk with the committee about, but I'm here tonight in my capacity as president of the Connecticut Conference of Municipalities to talk about the provisions in the budget regarding the payment in lieu of taxes, and in particular, to encourage the committee to incorporate into the budget the proposal reflected in SB 873 to increase pilot funding and to distribute that increase based on a 3-tiered formula that would leave all towns harmless, but would increase towns on a needs-based formula. I know you've heard from some other mayors already, but the most important message that I want to leave the committee with is that the Connecticut Conference of Municipalities, which is a bipartisan organization representing towns and cities of all sizes and all types throughout our state, stands strongly in support of this legislation. As you know, we are a state where we ask local governments to fund themselves with only one real source of locally generated revenue, and that's the property tax. And in communities that have a significant share of their tax base off limits, non-taxable under state statute, it can place an extraordinarily disproportionate burden on certain communities. Oftentimes, that places the highest tax burden on those residents who live in communities with the highest concentrations of poverty, the lowest concentrations of home ownership, and can create a vicious cycle where those communities that are most in need of attracting investment are at a competitive disadvantage because of the tax rate they must maintain in order to fund basic operations. It's important to stress that SB 873 would not still represent full funding of the pilot formula that has been on the books for decades. It does, however, represent an important step forward. It would make a difference for a number of communities, not just some of our largest cities, but a number of towns and suburbs. And I think that CCM's membership recognizes that in this small state, all of our communities to be successful need all of our other communities to be successful as well. And so CCM stands united in support. Finally, I would just like to remind the committee, as you well know, that when the sales tax was increased last, it was with the promise that a significant share of that would be distributed on needs-based formula to local governments. That hasn't happened. But as that question is posed, how do you pay for this? I would suggest, and CCM would suggest, that that question in some sense has already been asked and answered. It was asked and answered when the sales tax was last raised. And we think it's important to make a meaningful step forward toward more fully and appropriately funding the pilot formula. Using the time that I have, I'm going to very briefly take off my CCM hat to advocate for one other issue, purely in my personal capacity, which is as the state achieves savings from closing prisons, which is a welcome thing, and I applaud the Lamont administration for closing those prisons. I strongly encourage the committee to consider dedicating resources, some portion of those resources saved by those closures, to reentry programs and support for efforts to try to reduce recidivism and further reduce the size of our prison population in the years ahead, so that we may someday close even more prisons in the future with even more savings to the state. Thank you again for the opportunity to testify, and look forward to your questions if you have any.
Thank you very much, Mayor. Are there any questions for the mayor? I would just say one thing, Mayor, that part of your testimony should say where that funding went for the sales tax, and that went directly into transportation. So I think that that needs to be part of the discussion, because I think that when we passed it, it was designed solely to go into funding municipalities, and fully half of it went right away into transportation, then most of it went into transportation. So I think that that needs to be part of the discussion. But thank you very much, Mayor. Appreciate it. You're all set, Mayor. Up next is Cali Heilemann.
She is not
Cal-
present, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much. Janet Rice. Janet, I see you there. You have your 3 minutes now. Go ahead.
Thank you, Senator Olson, Representative Walker, and distinguished members of the Appropriations Committee for allowing me to speak this evening. I am a resident of Bloomfield. I work with Connecticut Against Gun Violence, but most importantly, I am a survivor of gun violence who turned my pain into purpose by working as a boot on the ground violence interrupter in Hartford with Compass Youth Collaborative as a peace builder. I would like to start with expressing my full support for fully funding Project Longevity. In my opinion, working with these offenders and meeting them where they are, giving them the push that some of them need, letting them know that there is always someone they can talk to, can go a long way, and helping them to stay on a better path, especially when they must go back to the same environment after leaving prison. Project Longevity does exactly that. On the personal side, on October 20th, 2012, just 55 days before the Sandy Hook shooting, my baby, my only child, was taken from me by gun violence. That day changed my life forever. Life as I knew it would never be the same for me again. Home was no longer home anymore, and my smiles were forced. In 2016, I was afforded the opportunity to help a young man make the right decision and put the gun down and think things through, not act on impulse. It was then that I learned to turn my pain, the pain of a grieving mom, into purpose. There are several gun violence prevention models in our cities in Connecticut doing valuable work. Some do prevention work and others do real-time de-escalation work. All these programs have an important role in gun violence prevention. When it comes to funding, we cannot forget these organizations going forward. Let us fortify these organizations with the funding they need and deserve, so they can continue to do the work that is needed to reduce community-level gun violence that plague our Black and Brown communities. As of now, Connecticut only funds Project Longevity. While Project Longevity deserves to be fully funded, Connecticut needs to increase the amount of funding it provides for gun violence prevention to ensure all effective gun violence prevention organizations have solid funding. The state has a moral obligation to do this. Thank you for allowing me to speak.
Thank you very much, Ms. Rice, for coming today. Appreciate it. Are there any comments? Senator Kushner.
Thank you, Ms. Rice, and thank you for sharing your story. And I want to express my sincere condolences for your loss and for the work that you're doing and advocating. I just wondered if there were any experiences you've had in intervention that you could share with us that would help us to understand the importance of this work?
Definitely. I can remember when I was a peace builder, I can remember one time seeing a young man, youth, arguing with an older guy on the street, and the older gentleman punched him. And when the young guy went to punch the older guy back, the friends of the older guy stopped him and wouldn't allow him to hit the guy back. And he was furious. He was so upset, this younger guy. And he walked away. This was the first hot day of the year. And he walked away. And as he walked away, he yelled out, "My shit," excuse my French, "my shit hole 30. So we all knew what he was going to do. This happened right outside my office. And myself and my team, we were all standing out, and I walked back in my office. I said I didn't want to see what was going to happen next because I knew what was going to happen next. When I seen this kid return, he was walking down the street in a bubble coat, a puffy coat, so hot that day. And I knew what he was doing. I knew what he had underneath the coat. And I just couldn't allow him to end his life that day. I couldn't allow him to end the life of the older guy. So I just went outside of the office and I walked up to him and I just bear hugged him and turned him around and just started walking away from, taking him in the opposite direction and just talking to him and telling him, you don't want to do this. You know, it's the middle of the day. There's cameras around. You'll end your life today. You'll end your life today. If you pull out and shoot this guy, you will end your life. You'll end his life. What would his family do? What would your family do? This is not what you want to do. There's better. There's more to life for you than to end it today. And I was able to get him to walk away. He walked away and he came back later and thanked me and my team because his intention was to go and kill the older guy. And he thanked us for talking him down and taking him, removing him out of that situation. Because at that time, he was not thinking.
Just angry. Well, I really appreciate you sharing that story because I think it's important that we understand what you're doing to really make a difference. And I applaud you and your courage. And it must be a very difficult work to do, but also you must feel very good about what you're accomplishing. So thank you for sharing that with us tonight.
Thank you.
Representative Walker.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And Jen, I just want to thank you for telling your story because people don't understand. I think everybody needs to come to one of Project Longevity's call-ins. I think that it moves you and you understand the what we do with that type of setting and how important it is to give contact to the kids because a lot of them are just sort of moving around and they don't know where they're going. And it's that one person that gives them a card or one person that gives them a smile or a hug that can change their life forever. And thank you for sharing that with us. Who's running Bridgeport's Project Longevity now?
Harold Dimbo.
Yep, Harold Dimbo.
Oh, okay. All right. Okay. That's good. I don't know him. I knew the originals, but I don't know him. I have to get to come down and see one. Thank you so much for your story.
Thank you. I just wish there was someone around the day my son was shot and killed. You know, maybe he would be, you know, if there was an interrupter there, then he would still be here today.
I wish there were many like you. I wish there were so many more like you and doing the good work that you're doing and saving lives. And so thank you for sharing that.
Representative Valinsky. You're muted, sir.
Thank you, Madam Chair, for unmuting or helping me unmute. Janet, you're an angel. Your story, you know, is touching, and your behavior in taking the most god-awful thing that could happen in your life and turning it into a quest for good means so very, very much. It's very inspirational. I know that we've been here before with Project Longevity, trying to restore the funding of it 2 years ago as well. So every time we have a budget, we have this issue. I would like to do what Representative Walker suggested. I'd like to check out the program, even though I've already voted to restore its funding in the past and will most likely do it again this time. You're an inspiration, ma'am. Thank you so much, and God bless you.
Thank you. We can't forget the other organizations out there that's doing the work as well.
Yeah, absolutely. We really do need to reward the kind, beautiful people in the community who really devote themselves to it for all the right reasons. And you're very inspirational. I'm so sorry for your loss.
Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Representative. Are there any other comments or questions for Ms. Rice? Thank you for everything you do, Ms. Rice. Thank you for coming tonight.
Thank you.
Up next is First Selectman of Voluntown, Tracy Hansen.
Hi. First, thank you to Janet for sharing her story. I'm still choked up from it and speaking now. It was very powerful. But Senator Ostin and Representative Walker and distinguished members of the committee, my name is Tracy Hansen and I am the first selectman of the town of Voluntown. I am here requesting that the committee approve an increase in the pilot funding. I am in support of Section 11 of SB 873 with some revisions that I have proposed for it as well. Voluntown is unique in the fact that Voluntown is 70% of the land is owned by the state of Connecticut. Over the years, the state of Connecticut has acquired more Voluntown land, yet our pilot funding has remained the same or actually decreased. The state of Connecticut is by far the largest property owner in our town, which puts a burden on our residents, and it also limits the amount of room we have left in town for housing development and for businesses. Usually our population doubles in the summer with residents from all over the state of Connecticut coming to Voluntown to experience the outdoor recreation that the state land provides. This year was absolutely insane due to the COVID-19, the number of people that came from all over the state to enjoy the outdoor recreation, and it left us struggling to manage the increased eating on the town roads, the increased drinking and drug use, car accidents, trespassing on private properties, and the increase in fire and emergency calls onto the state land. Our residents over the years have chosen to use their tax dollars to invest in our children's education. So our municipal government budget has been very underfunded over the years. There are many services that we do not have. We are currently a distressed municipality. We do not have social services in town. We do not have a senior center or rec center. We don't have a police department. We can't even afford a resident trooper. We need these things now. We desperately need the social services now, but to add all of these to our budget at this time would increase our mill rate drastically. And again, these are all things that our taxpayers are covering now, and that we're missing the revenue from without getting the pilot money from the state. Another thing that burden that we have with the state property is that most of it, well, a huge chunk of it is currently assessed at PA 490 value when they're doing the numbers for the pilot funding totals, which drastically hits our totals. Like I just got the list from our assessor, and all the property in PA 490 is assessed at about $4 million under PA 490. If it was assessed at regular value towards our pilot funding, that would be $33 million. So that's like a $28 million difference. So we're hit there with the current pilot formula. So what I requested for SB 873, because I see this as the great opportunity for Voluntown. I'm up here every year trying to get more pilot money. I'm requesting that for the pilot formula, that all the municipalities that have PA 490 land that go towards their pilot funding, that be assessed at regular value and not at PA 490 value when the pilot formula is being figured out. And I'm also requesting that for the tier, the proposed tier of the budget, Voluntown, even though it has the most state property, more than the cities, we would fall into tier 2, which would put us at 40% funding, because we just barely missed the $100,000 limit that the tiers are described by. So I'm requesting also that any municipality that has more than 50% of their property state-owned automatically be in the tier 1. And but other than that, I fully support the proposed pilot bill, and any money increase, bring it on. I support it and I am requesting it. So thank you for your time, and I'll answer any questions if you have any.
Well, thank you very much, Tracy, for coming up. It's a pleasure seeing you again.
Yes.
I feel that this is a perpetual discussion with
Yes.
Voluntown. And you know, I just have one question. What is your mill rate now?
Right now it's 29.21.
And what is a mill equivalent to in total dollars?
One mill is about $200,000. So the amount of money that we're requesting is like chump change compared to what the cities is requesting. Our whole budget is around $8 million. That's with maybe closer to 9 with the school and the town budget the amount of money that we would need to even fully fund our pilot is like chump change compared to the cities. It would still make a huge difference for my town. We would be able to get a resident trooper and social services for our residents, and probably we don't even have transportation for our seniors right now. We don't have anything. So
thank you, Tracy.
Thank you.
Appreciate that. Are there any questions? Seeing none, thank you so much, Tracy.
Thank you.
Have a nice night.
Good night.
Next up is Jeremy Stein. Jeremy, you're up.
Thank you so much, esteemed members, Chair Austin, Chair Walker, ranking members Minor and France, and distinguished members of this committee. I'm testifying in opposition to the $50,000 cut to Project Longevity in House Bill 6439, as included in the governor's proposed budget. I am asking to fully fund this program as it was passed in the 2021 budget. While Connecticut has the 6th lowest rate of gun deaths in the nation, we're still seeing an unacceptably high level of gun homicides here in Connecticut. And they disproportionately affect our communities of color and in our largest cities, as you heard. The victims of gun violence in Connecticut, 56% of the state's gun homicide victims are Black. However, only 10% of the state's population is Black, while accounting for about 14% of Connecticut's population. Same thing happens with Latinx communities. This disproportional rate, Latinx account for approximately 23% of gun homicide victims. And young Black men in Connecticut are about 39 times more likely to be murdered with a gun than a white man. If we want to achieve racial justice, we must make people safe in our communities where they live. And so to do so requires funding programs like Project Longevity that have a proven track record of reducing gun violence, support evidence-based programs. But we need to do more than just fund Project Longevity. There are so many other programs at the state level that we must be funding. And we must have a collaborative, evidence-based solution to ending gun violence once and for all. And the state has a moral and ethical obligation to fund these solutions. This solution of funding these evidence-based programs, we are calling the Connecticut Initiative to Prevent Gun Violence. It's included in House Bill 6043 and 6044, which was filed this year. And the idea is to get state-level funding, state-level coordination to be able to fund programs like Project Longevity and others that collaboratively work together to reduce gun violence in our cities. I'm looking at the gun death reports for 2020 right now on my screen, and when we look at homicides, in this year, New Haven, we saw a 70% increase in gun homicides. Bridgeport saw a 25 increase in gun violence, in gun homicides, and Waterbury, believe it or not, saw a 500% increase in gun homicides. Earlier, you heard from Marcus Wilson. Marcus and I met at a Project Longevity call-in. He is a perfect example of someone and something as simple as gun violence prevention programs that can change lives. And you're right, Senator Austin. Hopefully, we will see him in the legislature. I have no doubt that he will be on the screen someday. And he could have easily have been a statistic, but a program like Project Longevity literally saved his life. We also heard from Janet Rice, who's one of our outreach coordinators, and she describes, I've heard that story over and over, she literally stopped a shooting by putting her body in the way of a shooter. She is somebody that was trained as an interrupter. She did what she was supposed to do, and she saved a life. Something as simple as getting violence interrupters and interveners and programs in our communities are ways to reduce gun violence. I was talking earlier with Archie Generoso, who is the new statewide coordinator for Project Longevity, and he told me that every time they have a call-in, as Representative Walker was stating, every time they have a call-in, they see a drop in shootings immediately after these call-ins in every city that they do it in. There's no doubt that the program works, and because of Project Longevity, homicides in New Haven, Hartford, and Bridgeport dropped from 75 in 2011 to 31. It was a reduction of 50%. And we're going to need that 50% reduction because gun homicides increased 50% throughout the state because of COVID and what we saw in 2020. Project Longevity in New Haven has been studied extensively. It's associated with a reduction of nearly 5 group member involved shootings and homicides per month. That's according to a Yale University and University of Texas study that was done in 2016. Right now, gun violence costs about $1.2 billion in Connecticut. That's after the fact. That's what we spend on police, on hospitals, on pain and suffering. We spend less than $1 million on preventing gun violence in Connecticut. Other states like California, Maryland, New Jersey, Massachusetts, the list goes on and on. They've invested much more in preventing gun violence than we have. If we took a per capita snapshot of what we should be spending in Connecticut, we should be spending upwards of about $3 to $4 million.
Mr. Stein, are you almost done?
Yes, I implore you to not only fully fund Project Longevity, give them the extra $50,000 that they asked for years before, but also to consider funding other organizations, other groups as well. Today, we're asking for funding for Project Longevity. We're hoping that we can be back before this esteemed committee so that we can speak more about funding the Connecticut Initiative and looking at greater ways to reduce gun violence.
Thank you, Mr. Stein. Representative Felipe.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you for your testimony, Mr. Stein. I just wanted to go back to your point about violence interrupters. What sets them apart from, let's say, a civilian who just jumped in between somebody and a armed assailant?
Well, so there are 3 models that basically are utilized throughout the country, and 2 really speak to the violence interrupter model. There are hospital-based models, which are incorporated in organizations like Hartford Community Care and Street Safe, and Connecticut Violence Intervention Program. And then there are ceasefire models that are more community-based. And these people are literally trained kind of like negotiators, like you would see with the police. They understand the community, but they also, the fact is that I couldn't be an interrupter. it has to be someone that is invested in the community. It has to be somebody from the community. And more times than not, it is somebody who has walked in the shoes of some of these people that they are working with. A lot of the people that are most effective at this kind of work are the ones that were the Marcuses, that were the people that were involved in shootings. They were the ones holding the guns, and they know that they can talk to these people with a level of credibility to say, like, this is not the way. If you continue to use a gun to solve your problems, you will end up, there's only two ways out of this: jail or death. So a lot of these programs do have a lot of training involved in them. I know groups like the Hobby, which is a national group, has gone around the state of Connecticut training hospital-based intervention groups, and many of these groups found it extremely helpful in the kind of work that they do. But that takes money, that takes funding, and it takes a high level of training and continued training and a continued evaluation so that they can continue to do the work and use the most cutting-edge resources to be able to do this type of intervention work. And thank you, Representative Felipe, for all the work that you do in your community.
Thank you, and thank you for your answer and your clarification.
I'm sorry. Representative Baker.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Stein, I just want to thank you for coming out here and being a mouthpiece. And I'm very familiar with Project Longevity in Bridgeport. I've been working with them for a number of years. I know what they do. And I've seen the difference in the work that they've done out there in the community and stuff. And I can tell when they're out there and when they're not. And we're struggling in terms of what they can do and what they should be doing. Yeah, we're getting more and more when you have a lot of these kids. It's going home. It's emotional, social issues. It goes back to the homes. So we have to find a way to be able to get into the homes. And I think if Project Longevity does what they do on the streets, if we can take them a notch and come up to another level and stuff. So, and I ask you, could you elaborate a little more on is Project Longevity planning to, or are there some programs out there that are planning to do some more things that are working with the youth in their homes and to get down to the meat of what's going on in the homes as it's causing them to act out?
Yeah, so I mean, it's a great question, and I think that in order for focused deterrence models like Project Longevity to be the most effective, they have to work in tandem with the communities themselves, right? And so it can't just be the police, it can't just be a policing model. They have to be working in the communities, which includes schools, which includes community resources. So that collaboration between the parents, as you're talking about, and the schools and the communities is really key, which is why some of these community-based intervention models like the Compass Peace Builders are so important, because they're working directly with the youth. And I think what is most difficult, especially now in places like Bridgeport, when I talk to like Harold Dembo and others, is that a lot of their work they're doing requires like face-to-face contact. They're literally walking the streets to try to talk people down, and that has been virtually impossible to do with this pandemic. And so and that is, I think, why we saw a dramatic increase in gun violence. One of the many reasons. So you're absolutely right. Working with the communities, making sure we're partnering with schools, hospitals, social workers, mental health. That is the idea of the Connecticut initiative, is to have this kind of collaborative effort so that we are all taking, the best of the best and the best solutions and working together, because some of these gun violence issues are also quality of life issues.
Yeah, but thank you for being the mouthpiece. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much, Mr. Baker, Representative Baker. And are there any other questions for Mr. Stein? Seeing none, thank you very much for coming on tonight. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Next up is Irene Scribalo. I'm not certain I said your name right at
That's
all.
okay. It's close enough. That's okay. Scribalo. Hello, Appropriations Committee. My name's Irene Scribalo. I live in New Milford, and I'm testifying in opposition to the cut to Project Longevity as included in the governor's proposed budget. The state needs to invest more in preventing community gun violence that has disproportionately impacted Black and Brown communities. I'm reaching out to ask you to support a state-level grant-making authority with dedicated funding along the lines proposed by Connecticut Against Gun Violence. Now, I know what some of you are thinking, not all of you, but some of you are thinking, this doesn't speak to my constituents, I don't represent a large city, it's not important to my base. And I'm here to tell you it does matter. It is important. We need community-based gun violence prevention programs. And the problem isn't just in large cities, it's also in small towns. There are illegal guns being sold in my small town of New Milford from a brick and mortar. The ATF recently shut down a store that manufactured and transferred several guns that were not registered in the National Firearms Registration and Transfer Record as required by law. The guy running the store was missing paperwork for 1/3 of the guns he sold. I mean, who knows where that stuff wound up? And we have a responsibility to keep these people safe from firearms being sold illegally. And that's where groups like Project Longevity really make a difference. New Milford is part of the problem and we need to be part of the solution. And that's why I'm asking you to support this legislation to restore the funding. In the first 7 weeks of this year so far, as Justin Elliker mentioned, there have been 7 murders, 13 non-fatal shootings, 21 gun arrests, and 20 guns seized in New Haven alone. Police offered a range of actions that they plan on taking to curb the current crime spike, including restarting more regular Project Longevity call-ins. This group, along with other groups, need our support now more than ever. And if the moral imperative doesn't work for you, someone else had mentioned in terms of fiscal terms, I know that Jeremy mentioned that too, it adds up. And programs like this have, I hate to put it in these blunt terms, but they have a fantastic ROI if you're not going to look at the moral reasons for supporting groups like this. I did also want to mention we have an opioid problem in my small town of New Milford, and a group called Ice the Beef had actually reached out to the family that lost someone. So I just wanted to give them a shout out.
Thank you very much. Senator Kushner.
I just wanted to say, Irene, how much I appreciate the work you're doing and the work of CAGV. And I know that, you know, you do so much in our community. So I just wanted to let you know it's good that you're here tonight and we really appreciate you.
Thank you so much, Senator. I appreciate you too.
Are there any other comments or questions? Seeing none. Thank you very much for coming. We really appreciate you waiting around. Up next is Nicholas Payne.
Yes, yeah, my name is Nicholas Payne, and I sorry, yeah, from New Milford also, and I'm affiliated with Connecticut Against Gun Violence. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for the committee for this opportunity to testify. I am testifying in opposition to the 50K cut to Project Longevity as included in the governor's proposed budget. I ask you to fully fund the program as it was passed in the financial year 20 and 21 biennium budget. Our daughter Rebecca, here she is, was shot dead in May 2008 in her Boston apartment by a crack dealer who got the wrong address. Our life has never been the same since. She was our only child. She was a senior at Northeastern University studying athletic training. This is why I'm concerned about urban gun violence, and have spoken to both Brent Peterkin when he was there and also Harold Dimbo, and they both stressed the need for stable funding year to year. Also, I was struck by a comment by Iran Nazaria when he was at the Compass Peace Builders. He said the comment he hears more than most is, will you be there for me? This is referring to those who feel rightly they've been let down at times and fear being let down again. This is to say funding cuts not only cuts progress for the current year, but it can also undo the progress made in previous years. As a trivial example, a cut in road repair line item does not undo repairs made in previous years. I also support more funding for gun violence prevention programs and urge you to fully fund the Office for Policy Management budget for Project Longevity while fully funding project longevity is important, I believe the state also needs to invest more in preventing community gun violence, which disproportionately impacts Black and brown communities in Connecticut. This is why I'm also asking you to support state-level grant-making authority with dedicated funding along the line proposed by Connecticut Against Gun Violence. I would also deliver reliable funding to other types of community-based gun violence prevention programs. Again, I wish to thank the committee for this opportunity to testify.
Thank you, Mr. Payne. Are there any comments or questions? Thank you very much. Next up is Rahisha Bivens.
Hi.
Go ahead.
Hi, thank you for this opportunity. So my name is Rahisha Bivens, and I'm a resident of New Haven. I'm a licensed clinical social worker, justice advocate, and board member of Stop Solitary Connecticut. I'm here today to ask you to fund an independent oversight body over the Department of Corrections under the Office of Government Accountability, as the PROTECT Act, which is currently before the Judiciary Committee, would do. As someone who practiced medical social work and worked in nursing homes for over 12 years, I know greatly the difference that having an ombudsman in institutions that are charged with protecting the most vulnerable populations can do. Every year, there are over 2 million people with serious mental illness booked into Connecticut prisons. And there are 10 times the number of people with mental illness in prisons than there are in mental hospitals today. I got involved in advocating for the rights of incarcerated people, and in particular, ending solitary confinement in Connecticut when my younger brother, Joshua, who has schizophrenia, was incarcerated 3.5 years ago and languished in a cell the size of a bathroom for 21 hours out the day in pretrial detention. I was appalled that a system that claims to be focused on rehabilitating people is doing such damage. At the age of 29, my brother Joshua became 2 times the size he was when he went in. He became dependent on insulin and became diabetic. He became vitamin D deficient. And finally, he became hopeless, and I was afraid that he was going to end his life. Thousands of people who have serious mental illness are incarcerated in conditions of extreme isolation, even in the general population, all over the state of Connecticut. Instead of my brother getting the care and treatment that he needed that were related to his incarceration, he became more damaged than when he went in. 1 in 4 people incarcerated have mental illness in Connecticut, and it is widely known that putting people in solitary confinement can cause irreparable damage in as little as 7 days. On average, it costs $53,112 to incarcerate someone in the general population. We conservatively estimate that it is 2 times that amount to house someone in solitary confinement in Connecticut. Today, after advocating for my brother to be sent to a hospital, my brother Joshua no longer needs insulin. He has lost weight. He has no mental health symptoms, and he now has the opportunity to be a productive citizen. I urge you to support an independent oversight body to ensure incarcerated people, their lives are truly protected, and that we really have a longstanding system in Connecticut to cause ongoing transformation. Without an independent oversight body, just ending solitary confinement will do little to change the culture of isolation and dehumanization that is present in Connecticut currently. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Ms. Bivens. Are there any questions or comments? Seeing none, thank you very much for coming tonight. Appreciate it. So, ladies and gentlemen, we have finished our public hearing tonight. I've already checked with Madam Administrator. There is nobody left in the waiting room. I think we had a successful public hearing. Madam Administrator, is there anything else we need to pass on to the Appropriations Committee?
I don't think so.
When's our next meeting?
We had a good day today. We have the Health Subcommittee tomorrow, and we start with the Department of Public Health at 10 o'clock.
All righty, everybody. So tomorrow, the Health Subcommittee briefings will be happening, and we will not have a public hearing tomorrow night, though. That public
Correct.
hearing is not until March. So thank you very much. Thanks, everybody, for all the great work today. Have a nice night. Thank you.
Thank you. Good night, everyone.